So I've been playing a lot of Dead Space recently, and as a sound designer and composer, this is an audio goldmine. In this video series, I'm finding video game examples to explain and exemplify audio theory terms and definitions. My hope is that this knowledge will better your sound design or compositional practices in the same way that they've helped my own. And whilst playing through Dead Space, when I wasn't jumping out of my skin, I found a really good gameplay sequence to use as an example. And today we're going to watch it together in a few different ways. But before that, let's recap what we've learned in the previous video and introduce a new definition. So in the previous video, we discussed something called the audiovisual contract in a book called Audiovision by Michel Chion. Just to recap, the audiovisual contract is a phenomenon that happens when we watch or experience a visual media through the visuals and through the audio. And really, I'd recommend you watch the first video because it explains it a lot better than I'm going to be able to in, these 20 seconds. However, to summarize, audio adds a lot more information than we might first think. And today I want to pull up another definition from this book called added value. And this basically explains or goes into depth what exactly is the value that audio adds and how does it differentiate from the visuals or other parts of the audiovisual media. By added value, I mean the expressive and informative value with which a sound enriches a given image so as to create the definite impression in the immediate or remembered experience one has of it. That this information or expression naturally comes from what is, it's really long, so let's just summarize exactly what he's talking about. The first part is probably the most important. By added value, I mean the expression and informative value with which a sound enriches a given image. So this is coming back to the notion that sound doesn't merely mimic the visuals on screen, but it adds and extends to the value, to the information, and pushes the imagination of our experience of it. Audio can even make it seem like the visuals are doing something that they're not. For instance, Ben Burtt, the sound designer for the original Star Wars saga, made such a convincing door-opening sound that in Empire Strikes Back, the director would sometimes simply use two static shots of a door, one closed and then one open. And the sound on top was convincing enough to create the illusion of it opening instantly. In video games, this is similarly used where minimal visuals provide an opportunity for sound to add to the illusion. One of my favorite examples of added value in film is in my favorite movie of all time, Stepbrothers. The scene I'm talking about is when Brennan is told by Dale not to touch his drum set. And as we zoom in on the drum kit, we get this musical motif played over the top of it. And when we hear this motif, it's very choir, epic, orchestra-like. It adds to the illusion that this instrument, this thing is sacred and shouldn't be touched. And it adds so much humor to an otherwise very static shot. Another great film example is in Mad Max Fury Road, where they've added animal sounds to the mechanical engines of the vehicles to give them character and personality. Another really great example that I love is from a movie called No Country for Old Men. There's so many subtle moments in this movie where sound design plays a really underlying but important role. And a scene that comes to mind is this really brutal strangling scene in the middle of the movie. Now, again, I have to give a trigger warning because it's quite a violent scene, but it's such a good example of it.
You got me. Well, you can look at it when you get in. Down there in a bit. Yes, sir. I got it under control.
You'll notice there is no music, and the most prominent sound is the squeaking of the shoes on the floor. However, did any of you hear the train going by in the background? Now, there is no train near this scene or this setting. This train is a motif played throughout the film, underlying Javier Bardem's character throughout this movie. Another really subtle but powerful way that audio can add value to a scene.
What business is it of yours?
Today, I've also got a personal example of a game I'm currently working on. The visuals are very synthetic and computer-like, so it would have been the obvious choice to use synthesized and electronic-based sounds to match this. However, based on the story behind the game, being that you are a train operator behind a massive switchboard, I decided to use analog switches and clicks instead. And because of it, I'm not just mimicking the visuals, but I'm adding a whole new dimension and depth to the narrative and game feel, to an otherwise quite 2D and flat visual experience. Okay, so enough examples, let's come back to the Dead Space clip that I teased at the start of this video. In Audiovision, Michel Chion also says, sound shows us the image differently than what the image shows alone. And the image likewise makes us hear sound differently than if the sound were ringing out in the dark. Essentially saying that we can experience a clip in many different ways. The fact that we have all of the components together is the intended experience for a viewer. However, when we take one of these components away, i.e. the audio or the visuals or both, we suddenly end up with a very different experience. He exemplifies this in his book with a similar experiment with a very artsy kind of film. So I'm going to take that idea and I'm going to replace the film with a Dead Space clip. So we're going to watch it through 3 times, and each time we're going to notice how our experience, how our impression of the sequence changes. First, let's watch it through with full audio. So as you can see, it's a very well choreographed scene. You know, the music, the sound design, everything's working in tandem to lead up and focus to this event that's happening before us. Now let's try it without any music. So just the sound design and the visuals together. The first thing that I notice is that the visceral blood and gore and sound effects is way more present in the mix because the music isn't distracting from it, you could say. And to me, it's almost more immersive now as a scene without the music because we're focusing in on those bodily sounds, right? The gore, the stuff that relates to us as human beings, which is a whole other subject that we're going to talk about in another video. Something else you may notice is that towards the end, you can hear that heartbeat sound design layer that comes in, and it only happens when Isaac is in a big state of fear, for instance. Again, to me that's more immersive because I can relate. I have a heartbeat and it does, beat faster when I'm scared, for instance. Okay, the last watch that I want to do with you is with no visuals whatsoever. So just the sound design and no visuals, no music. Again, similar to the example without music, the sound design is again amplified. We're no longer distracted by the visuals and the heartbeat is way more prominent. The gore, the blood aspect of the sound design is way more again, tangible and kind of, spine tingling. I'd also love to hear what you noticed aside from what I've just mentioned, or if you just want to comment on what I've said, then, please drop a comment below this video. I really love this exercise because something that I always profess to students is to listen to their work with their eyes closed. By closing your eyes, you take away the visuals, you take away the distraction maybe, or the way we lean into or rely on visuals sometimes. Allows us to focus in on how much value we're really adding with our audio or music. And by taking the visuals away or by taking the music away, we can see what we're missing basically in our audio. Could we be describing it more? Could we be adding to the narrative? What is the story, and have we really defined it as well as we can? So that's it for this video. Thank you again for watching. If you enjoyed it, please let me know in the comments below. That way I'll be encouraged to continue the series and talk about all sorts of other really cool definitions.